So we just had the NASCAR 26 Q&A last Friday, and I've given it a few days as well for the community to kind of soak it in and for myself to also soak it in, as I made a video on Friday immediately following the Q&A to basically get you guys up to speed, to present the facts of what is going to be in this game based off the Q&A and what's not going to be in the game. And I didn't really give any actual opinions on it, and I've certainly, like I said, given a few days of thought and was able to kind of compile some of my opinions in a general consensus, and as well as a bit of a reaction to maybe some of the community's kind of take on it, because I've seen, kind of two different sides to it as well. I mean, there's one side that's on basically the one side, and then there's the other side that's on the completely other extreme end as well. So we're going to talk about that here today, but I want to start, before addressing that, I would like to just kind of start with my personal thoughts on the Q&A, and there's a few things that I'm disappointed by, I'm not going to lie, and as well, on top of that, there's some things that I was very excited to hear and content with, and looking forward to seeing where certain things go. And let's get the things that I was excited to hear out of the way. Dynamic tracks was obviously the biggest one. I think people are discounting how big of a feature this is going to be for NASCAR gaming, as long as it works as it's intended to. That's the main thing. If it works as it's intended to, this feature is going to be a really big feature for just the future of NASCAR gaming. And like I said, if it works like it should, people are really underestimating this feature and not giving it enough credit. And the way Matt Lewis talked about it as it kind of, develops over the course of the weekend, I think is pretty exciting. And he also mentioned how it's going to open up doors to, instead of running one lane throughout a race, no, you're going to have opportunities to move around and run the second, if you want to, let's look at NASCAR 25. It's top line dominated for 90% of the tracks, but now hopefully that's going to open up the door to shift down to the bottom, and then both lanes have some speed and you can make it work. So that in itself, that was really exciting to me. Replay cameras and improvements, that's exciting to me, because I love, and that's just a biased thing from my position, because when I'm making videos, I love to include replay cameras, but the replay system in NASCAR 25 was so atrocious that it was something that I just completely cut out of my video style for that game specifically, and it was really frustrating. But now it seems like we are finally getting a better and improved replay system, which I know they talked about last game was something they really were wanting to make sure was better for NASCAR 26. How about the paint booth as well? Paint booth improvements, they talked about 50 shapes per side of the car. So, 50 shapes on the front bumper, on the hood, on the roof, on the side of the car, the mirroring stuff. The paint booth, I'm really happy to hear about the improvements that they have made for the paint booth of this game. Now, I myself, I used to love making paint schemes previously, way back in the day, like 10 years ago in the Technics games like NASCAR 14, 15. However, I'm not really a guy that likes to sit down anymore and put time into a paint scheme, to be completely honest. So that's also why I love the fact that they have preset paint schemes available. But I know this is going to be a feature or addition, improvement that's going to benefit everybody that is interested in making paint schemes, because before we only had like 50 shapes that you could put total on the car. Now you got 50 shapes per side. Now I will say, I still don't think that is going to be enough. I think that going into NASCAR 27, they got to keep on upping that limit by as much as they can get away with, because you can very easily take up 50 shapes on one side with some pretty simple designs, and then you're already out of stuff to do. But still a great step in the right direction. And the mirroring, that is a huge one as well. Being able to mirror stuff from one side to the other saves so much hassle through any paint scheme making. The big one for me, though, that I'm also a huge fan of, and this was a question that I asked myself to Matt Lewis, and that was about the AI improvements on pit logic as well as the variants, because you guys have mentioned this to me so many times in my comments throughout my NASCAR 25 career mode, throughout my live streams, and I felt the exact same way as you guys. The pit logic was very frustrating to deal with in NASCAR 25, still is very frustrating to deal with, and the lack of variance is also super frustrating because it just feels like making any career mode is irrelevant, because I know that the AI is basically going to give me the same season in the third season that they gave me in the first season. The only thing that's going to change is my own performance, and it's just not fun at that point. And that's been something I've been dealing with now in the third season of my NASCAR 25 career mode. It's been very frustrating to do because I'm just seeing the same thing that I saw the last 2 seasons at every track. And now we know there's going to be improvements to the pit logic, which I'm excited for. Now, of course, how far of an improvement, that is yet to be seen. And same for the variance in the AI. It was confirmed we're going to have more variance. It was confirmed also we're going to have a slider to kind of adjust the amount of variance that you see. So that is a great step in the right direction, and I'm super excited to probably just crank that slider to the absolute maximum, to be completely honest. But of course, I'm going to be very finicky with it because I'll be putting out a whole settings video within the first week of that game and what's going to be the best settings for your races now. And playing NASCAR 25 for all the hours I have kind of gives you a good baseline of what you need to aim for NASCAR 26 settings. The first thing, though, that I'm going to test when we get to NASCAR 26 is, I'm kid you not, I'm going to go to Las Vegas specifically, and I'm going to do 3 straight qualifying sessions. And if I see the front row drivers as William Byron and Kyle Larson, for example, all 3 races, I'm going to be very disappointed. So we'll see. Well, hopefully, I've got a lot of confidence based off just what Matt said, that I feel like that they've definitely taken a great step in the right direction. So I'm hopeful that's not something that we are going to see. Another thing I was a fan of is the new tire model that they talked about, because it's currently too forgiving. And Matt mainly talked about the fact that, it's going to be easier to kind of break grip on the tire now. For example, braking at a road course or short tracks as well, like a Martinsville specifically or a Richmond, you can get away with just mashing the brake pedal. I do it all the time. I mean, I don't go a 100% brake, but I slam the brake pedal really hard, really fast, and I get away with it on road courses at Martinsville, at Richmond, heavy braking zones. You don't really lock up a wheel. It sounds like from the explanation from Matt is they really worked on overhauling that, and you're not going to be able to get away with that kind of arcadey just slam the brake pedal anymore. And I do think them going in more of it kind of feels like they're getting away from the arcadey approach, but they're not going too sim. It's more of that simcade kind of approach, and I think that's a great way to go. You don't want to go too far on the sim route, but you don't want to be too far on the arcade side either, especially I feel like in this era of racing games. As well, I mean, the main thing as well that I look at left over that I really liked, of course, like the Kyle Busch tribute. I really like how they're playing tribute to him. Of course, I'm a big fan of them talking about how there's going to be better force feedback improvements, and controller support is going to have more tools to kind of mess around with to get a better experience overall for players on controller. Safety violations, of course, with the kind of system to basically prevent idiots online from, getting to spend an entire race trolling. I hope that maybe hosts can kind of determine like those limits. They can kind of set a limit. That would be kind of cool, like the threshold that if someone goes over that, of course, they get kicked from the lobby. I think that would be pretty cool. I mean, there's a few small career mode things that I like in terms of like facility upgrades and the inclusion of door bumper clear. Anything that's being added to the career mode is great, but I know, of course, there's a lot of disappointment over the lack of things that I've seen based off the comments that's being added to the career mode, which we will talk about here momentarily. But they also did say the peak performance mode is going to be included in career mode. Still, of course, I'm hopeful that it's going to be relevant for someone like myself and many others that know a lot about NASCAR, know a lot about the games, and I'm hopeful that it's going to still find a way to benefit us as well. And of course, there's some things that I'm disappointed about, though, going into NASCAR 26, and I said all NASCAR 25 life cycle that I felt like the ability to, in career mode, drive for real teams should absolutely be a NASCAR 26 thing, still is not a thing. So I was very, very disappointed to see that I have to own a team and manage a team again. That's just not something I like to do. For example, in the F1 games, I always avoid F1 my team because I don't have an interest in owning a team. I always only play driver career. I think players should absolutely have the option between one or the other, and I really hope that's something that's on the higher priority list going for NASCAR 27, since we now know it's not going to be in NASCAR 26, which also just reminded me, this is a complete side bit, but I hope we can have multiple sponsors at a time on the car in career mode as well, like a primary sponsor, secondary, so on and so forth. I think would be really nice. I know they wanted to do that in 25, so hopefully that does get brought into NASCAR 26. And I've been seeing comments as well. Some people have been telling me that they don't think the career mode has enough to warrant them basically buying another game for NASCAR 26. They feel like it could be more of a DLC instead of like a full priced game, for example. And looking at the career mode, I don't necessarily disagree with that take, because what I've seen from the career mode so far as well, I'm more in line with just like, yeah, I don't really see enough in there to keep me engaged very long either, beyond doing like a full season of the Cup Series. Like, I'm gonna do my ARCA, I'm gonna do my trucks, my O'Reilly, and then I'm gonna do my Cup season, and I'm not sure if there's just gonna be enough there to keep me engaged beyond that. And I think that's something obviously that we know is already not going to be, the focus for NASCAR 26. Hopefully that is the focus for 27. It's just more in-depth for that career mode, because, yeah, I definitely agree with the people saying, like, yeah, there's really not a lot in that career mode so far that seems like it's going to kind of keep us engaged for much longer than it did in NASCAR 25. So I totally understand where some of those complaints are coming from. Now, before I jump into more of the community and as well, like, some more negative things that I've noticed as well, and as well you guys have talked about, I also want to point out that, we as NASCAR fans have been in an unfortunate position for, almost 20 years. Oh my God. I didn't even realize that. It's been nearly 20 years that we've been in this unfortunate situation of, EA left, and then we had a time of nothing, and then Eutechnics came in, and they were around for just a few games, for 4 games or so, and then they were gone. And then we had 704 games come in and do the NASCAR Heat stuff and whatnot, and then they were gone. And then Motorsport Games comes in, and it's a one and done for them, and then they're gone, and then we have all this time of nothing, and then now we're finally getting NASCAR games again. So I understand people, talking about, patience, and as well, I saw a tweet actually from my good buddy on Twitter, Elite Precision, actually mentioning players' patience is just gone. The community has been told to be patient since the Eutechnics era, which is totally valid, I would say. But the thing is, if you're not patient in this era where we've gone through this unique situation where we've had different handlers of the game, then you're always going to be let down, because the reality is every time a new, entity comes in to make these games, it is a complete reset. So unfortunately, as much as I hate it, as much as you hate it, we have to be patient whether we like it or not. And the biggest kind of blow is just the fact that, keep in mind as well, NASCAR isn't what it used to be in the mid-2000s, a big popular sport that would have more money pouring into the gaming side and higher budgets and whatnot at the time for the resources they had available as well. They could do a lot more in less time, where now NASCAR is not one of the most popular sports anymore in North America. NASCAR has become a niche, unfortunately, and when your sport is now a niche, instead of pulling 10 plus million viewers per week or per race, you're now pulling about 2 million. Well, guess what? The gaming side also gets less budget. There's going to be less employees, also known as things take longer. As much as we hate it, that's the reality of the situation. I feel like we could really benefit on more people at least understanding that. But nonetheless, let's continue on. Now let's talk about silly season. Now, this obviously relates to career mode, so good time to kind of slide this into the video, and this is a very interesting one, and I'm not going to play Matt's audio describing it because that was in my original Q&A video. You can go back and listen to it if you want, but silly season is not going to be in NASCAR 26. Am I disappointed? Well, I'm disappointed anytime silly season's not in a sports game, but do I understand why it's not in there? Absolutely. And I also understand, the fact that they talked about, Matt talked about, that everyone's kind of on board with making this happen, and I think that's great news to hear. And I'm hopeful. I don't think you're going to see it in NASCAR 27 either, to be honest, because this is a feature that takes a long time to make happen in the NASCAR world, and this is where I see a lot of the negativity come out of the community that I think is not fully warranted on a feature like silly season, because silly season's not just a feature they can say, okay, yeah, we're gonna go put this in the game. No, they have to get every party on board, from drivers to sponsors to NASCAR itself, and there is so much legal stuff that they have to navigate through with all the contracts and whatnot that everyone's got in place between sponsors and drivers and whatnot. Just the fact that they told us, though, that they want to do it and that everyone's on board with doing it is a huge step in the right direction. And people say, oh, they can have it in, NBA or NFL, no problem whatsoever. It is a very, very different world compared to NASCAR. The sponsors are so much more engraved in the drivers and the teams and whatnot in NASCAR than they are with a player in the NBA or the NFL or NHL, you name it. So it takes a lot more to make it happen in the NASCAR game. So we just got to simply be patient. I wish that people would realize that we just got to be a bit more patient with stuff like that, because they came out and they told us they want to do it. They're on board with doing it. They have gotten people on board with doing it, or the other parties on board, I should say, with doing it. So all signs point to it happening, but it's just something you're gonna have to be patient for, because there's so much more that goes into a silly season on NASCAR versus, other typical sports games. Look at the F1 games. Codemasters had the license from 2010, and it took them until, I think, F1 2019 to actually make a silly season happen. We are in year 2 of this NASCAR development cycle of course, who it's under with iRacing Studios and Monster Games. It took Codemasters in F1 9 years to make it happen. Now, I don't think we're going to be waiting that long. I don't think we'll be waiting anywhere near that long for NASCAR games to pull it off, but I'm just saying it took 9 years to make that happen in F1, who's got a lot more budget, by the way, and more employees to make that kind of stuff happen. Now, one thing I was also really disappointed about actually was no blown tires for the player in the game and no player DNFs. And of course, I mean, again, I understand, all the explanation. And I will say as well, before I dive further into this, a big thank you, as I saw some people actually complaining that Matt Lewis was too descriptive on why something wasn't in the game. I think it's absolutely fantastic that they're willing to be that transparent about why something isn't in the game. Even if it's not the answer you want to hear, it's very nice to at least have an actual proper explanation and answer about why something isn't in the game. But certainly I'm disappointed that blown tires aren't in NASCAR 26 for the player, at least. I'm sure maybe the AI could kind of have it. Usually when you see those weird spins, it almost looks like a tire failure. But when it comes to the player, obviously every single race in NASCAR, there's 36 races a year, and all 36 races, well, maybe excluding super speedways for the most part, tire issues are a very prominent thing of every race and the challenges that a driver and team face. And I think that should have already been represented in NASCAR 25. Obviously, it's not even in NASCAR 26 yet. So that I'm definitely disappointed about. That was, oddly enough, I think that was like the number one thing I was disappointed about. Maybe a small thing, but I was really disappointed to see that. It's like, to me, like having like a hockey game come out without like injuries or something, like, which is a very prominent and normal thing in a hockey game, or in hockey in general. As a hockey fan, I can guarantee that. But so yeah, I mean, there's things I'm disappointed about that I want to see, but I mean, as well, there's things that I'm really happy that we're getting a lot of these improvements that I talked about. And I've again seen things such as, the disappointment around no split screen, and people thought the excuse wasn't acceptable, that it's hard to do for split screen. And I I do say as well, I mean, I would love to see split screen. I don't really play split screen on anything, but I'm sure at some point, I mean, I've done it actually, way back in the day with my dad. I know that split screen is very important, especially for the younger generation, having friends over, playing with them, and being able to play even with their parents. Like I said, I never really played split screen much with my friends growing up, but I would play NASCAR with my dad. He would hate it because I would wreck him all the time for the wins. And I was like a young Carson Hocevar when I was like 10 years old, okay? But, of course, a lot of people said, well, they had it in NASCAR Thunder 2003 or 2004. They had it in NASCAR 2011. So saying it's hard to pull off is just an embarrassing excuse and whatnot. I don't agree with that narrative, basically. And I mean, of course, back in the day, those game engines, they could handle split screen very easily. They weren't as taxing and demanding on hardware. And I actually dove into this a little bit in terms of actually researching, because I said, okay, why don't we see split screen in these modern games, not only from NASCAR, but to just games in general? Because I actually wanted to understand, and I went and found some comments from an actual game developer, and basically echoing their words, the main reason is you're basically rendering 2 or sometimes 4 scenes instead of 1, so you will have to scale back on the detail level to maintain a high frame rate. So now you're maintaining multiple rendering paths depending on how the game is played, and assuming the game could be reasonably large, you don't fit everything into RAM at once. Things are streamed in and out depending on the position of the player. And now you're tracking, say, 2 players in a split screen instance in a NASCAR game in a world in different places on the track. That's significantly less memory that's being allocated to each player, which is sometimes why you see, like, other games outside of racing games, like they force players to stay in like the same area. They would then also say, like, in quotes, back in the day, it was just easier because you could just have multiple cameras and little outs needed to be taken into account because that stuff, they weren't so taxing on the hardware, where now games without split screen are already so taxing on the hardware. So long story short, when they say it's actually pretty hard to pull off split screen now, they're not kidding. It's actually a demanding thing to pull off. Now, I am very hopeful they do pull it off, because I think split screen is very important to see in a NASCAR game for the same reasons I already listed. Growing up, playing with my dad, that was a cool time. And obviously, I know a lot of you would love to be able to kick back and play with your friends and stuff like that. So I want to see those things still, and I know a lot of you guys do. But that's kind of my opinion piece is nearly as long as the Q&A video I had itself. But I want to just kind of end my opinion kind of on the negativity and whatnot, on just the fact that I think it's important for everyone to just remember that, although I know a lot of people are expecting a whole lot of features by year 2, the important thing to remember is NASCAR isn't the sport that it was in the mid-2000s. NASCAR was super popular. They were pulling in a ton of money. They had a super high viewership. And when your sport is one of the most popular sports in all of North America, it's a lot easier to get these games fully fleshed out with a lot of different features, because there's more money pouring in, there's more employees that are able to work on certain things, the budgets are higher. You got to keep in mind now that NASCAR, even from my experience here in Canada, NASCAR is barely relevant anymore compared to, say, Formula One, which is completely taken over. And you look, of course, at the viewership of NASCAR, it has completely fallen off a cliff, although it's stabilized and, even shows a bit of signs of going back in the right direction. It has completely fallen off a cliff to where it was in those mid-2000s. They don't have the budgets and the employees that are going to be able to just flush out all these features super fast. And of course, you compare it to, I hear the excuse sometimes, the F1 games have all these features and they have no problem getting all this stuff in the game. They have a massive budget compared to NASCAR and a massive amount of more employees. Of course, they are going to be able to do those things way faster than NASCAR games. It's just important. What I'm trying to say is it's important to remember that NASCAR isn't what it used to be. it is now a very, very niche sport, and that's always going to be represented as well. On the gaming side, it's a niche, it's going to take time because the budgets and the employee numbers are just not the same that it is in other sports games, for example. I wanted to keep this honest and, most importantly, respectful for the community, because I certainly, when I was reading the chat in the actual Q&A, there was some people that were just out of their minds on some of the expectations they have, and I didn't want to go on and come here and blast those people. I wanted to keep it as respectful as I could, and I feel like I did a good job of that. There's going to be certain things that I said maybe that you guys certainly don't agree with, and there's going to be things that you probably do agree with, and I challenge you to comment down below and create a discussion on what I said that you did agree with, or, well, I guess if you agreed with me, you're not going to probably discuss about it, but if you didn't agree with me on certain things, absolutely feel free to let me know in the comments below. I would love a discussion, but just like I did in the video, please keep it respectful. That's the main thing here in this community, and I very much am open to a respectful discussion about, maybe your disappointments and what you don't agree with me on in the future of NASCAR gaming in general. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.